Imagine waking up covered in blood, your husband missing, and a dozen police officers pointing guns at you. For Ashley Judd, this interrogation was the start of a story so convincing that millions of people still believe the legal loophole it created could actually let you get away with murder. We have an innate, almost obsessive fascination with the concept of the perfect crime. We are captivated by the idea of an ordinary person outsmarting the massive, overwhelming machinery of the justice system. In the late 1990s, a cinematic masterpiece called Double Jeopardy blurred the lines between Hollywood fiction and actual legal jurisprudence so effectively that law professors to this day still have to spend their first week of criminal law classes deprogramming their students. But to understand why this myth is so incredibly pervasive, and why it is profoundly dangerous if you ever find yourself sitting in an interrogation room, we first have to analyze the psychological architecture of the case as if it were a real true crime file sitting on a homicide detective's desk. Let us examine the facts of the incident involving Elizabeth Libby Parsons. She is a wealthy, seemingly happy wife and mother from Seattle, embarking on a romantic weekend sailing trip with her husband, Nick. They are out on the open water, completely isolated from society. The physical isolation of maritime environments is a classic breeding ground for untraceable crimes because the ocean washes away forensic evidence with brutal efficiency. Libby wakes up in the middle of the night. The cabin is dark, the boat is rocking violently, and she is covered in a massive amount of fresh blood. Her husband is nowhere to be found. In a state of pure shock, she follows the blood trail to the deck, where she discovers a bloody knife. Exactly as she picks up the weapon, the Coast Guard suddenly illuminates the boat with a massive spotlight. From a tactical and investigative standpoint, this is the ultimate nightmare scenario for a defense attorney. You have the suspect at the scene of the crime, covered in the victim's blood, holding the suspected murder weapon, with zero witnesses to corroborate any alternative theory of the event. The subsequent investigation and trial are a masterclass in circumstantial evidence manipulation. Nick Parsons had a $2 million life insurance policy, providing a clear, undeniable financial motive. The blood on the deck matches his blood type. The Coast Guard's radio recordings capture Libby's confusion, which the prosecution brilliantly twists into the calculating panic of a cold-blooded killer. She is swiftly convicted and sentenced to prison. It is here, in the bleak, dehumanizing environment of a correctional facility, that the psychological shift of our suspect occurs. The identity of the innocent housewife is burned away, replaced by a hardened, cynical inmate who realizes she has been flawlessly framed by the very man she loved. Nick faked his own death, changed his identity, and walked away with the insurance money, leaving her to rot in a concrete box. But then comes the moment that cemented this story into the cultural zeitgeist. While incarcerated, Libby meets a fellow inmate who happens to be a former lawyer. This jailhouse attorney gives her a piece of advice that sounds so legally sound, so perfectly logical, that the audience completely buys into it without a second thought. The lawyer tells Libby about the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution, specifically the Double Jeopardy Clause. The clause dictates that no person shall be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. The lawyer's interpretation is intoxicatingly simple. She tells Libby that because she has already been convicted and has served time for the murder of Nicholas Parsons, she can never be charged with his murder again. The lawyer famously states that Libby could walk right up to Nick in the middle of Times Square, pull out a gun, and shoot him dead in front of 1,000 witnesses, and the state could not do a single thing about it. It is the ultimate legal free pass. A license to kill, granted ironically by the very system that wrongfully imprisoned her. This sets up a phenomenal revenge fantasy. The audience watches Libby endure her sentence, completely fueled by the ironclad belief that she has a constitutional right to murder her husband upon her release. We watch her get paroled, skip town, and engage in a thrilling, high-stakes cat and mouse game with her parole officer, played by Tommy Lee Jones. The sheer brilliance of this narrative trap is that it makes the audience root for a premeditated homicide because it feels entirely justified and, crucially, completely legal under the rules established by the movie. We want her to pull the trigger. We want the system to be forced to let her walk away because she already paid the price. But hold on. Stop everything. Take a deep breath and listen to me very carefully, because this is where the fantasy shatters and the terrifying reality of the American justice system takes over. What if I told you that the very loophole that freed her is a complete and utter fabrication? Everything you just heard, the entire foundation of this beloved revenge thriller, is a total, reckless lie that would absolutely land you in federal prison for the rest of your natural life. In fact, if you actually tried to use this jailhouse defense in a real courtroom, the judge would laugh you straight into solitary confinement. The real truth about the Fifth Amendment is far darker, incredibly complex, and involves a terrifying legal trapdoor that prosecutors use every single day to destroy criminal defendants. Do not look away, because we are about to tear apart the greatest legal myth in cinematic history and expose the brutal mechanics of how the law actually works. To dismantle this myth, we have to look precisely at the exact wording of the Fifth Amendment and how the Supreme Court has interpreted it over the last 2 centuries. The Constitution protects you from being tried twice for the same offense. The fatal flaw in the movie's logic hinges entirely on the definition of the words "same offense." When the jailhouse lawyer tells Libby she cannot be tried again for murdering Nick Parsons, she is deliberately confusing the identity of the victim with the identity of the crime. In the eyes of the law, a crime is defined by its physical execution in space and time. It is a specific event. When Libby was convicted in Washington state, she was convicted of a specific incident of murder that allegedly occurred on a specific date, on a specific boat, in a specific body of water. That was the offense. If Libby tracks Nick down 5 years later in the humid, bustling streets of New Orleans, pulls out a revolver, and shoots him in the chest, that is not the same offense. When the trigger is pulled in Louisiana, a completely new chain of physical and legal events is instantly initiated. A new bullet leaves a new chamber. It strikes a living, breathing biological organism in a completely new geographical jurisdiction. The state of Louisiana does not care whatsoever about a death certificate filed in Washington state 5 years prior. The law protects living human beings, not legal fictions. When Nick is shot in New Orleans, the specific elements of a brand new crime are fulfilled. There is a new actus reus, which is the guilty act of firing the weapon, and a new mens rea, which is the guilty mind or the premeditated intent to kill him in that specific moment. Therefore, the murder in New Orleans is a distinctly separate offense from the alleged murder on the boat. The Double Jeopardy clause offers absolutely zero protection here. She would be immediately arrested, charged with first-degree murder, and likely sentenced to life in prison or worse. But the legal destruction of this Hollywood myth goes even deeper than just time and location. It brings us to one of the most powerful and controversial weapons in the prosecutor's arsenal, known as the dual sovereignty doctrine. Even if we pretend for a moment that the second shooting was somehow considered the same continuous crime, the United States operates under a federalist system. This means there are multiple separate sovereign entities that have the power to prosecute crimes independently of one another. The federal government is one sovereign, and each of the 50 individual states is its own separate sovereign. The Supreme Court has consistently ruled that an act violating the laws of 2 different sovereigns constitutes 2 distinct offenses. This means that if you commit a crime that breaks both a state law and a federal law, the state can put you on trial, and if you are acquitted and found not guilty, the federal government can immediately step in and put you on trial for the exact same physical action. This is not a theoretical concept. It happens in high-profile true crime cases all the time. One of the most famous examples is the Rodney King police brutality case in the early 1990s. 4 Los Angeles police officers were tried in a California state court for excessive use of force and assault. The state jury acquitted them, sparking massive riots. But because of the dual sovereignty doctrine, the Double Jeopardy clause did not stop the federal government from stepping in. The Department of Justice indicted the officers on federal civil rights charges for the exact same beating, and 2 of them were convicted and sent to federal prison. Applying this brutal reality back to our murder suspect, Libby Parsons. When she allegedly killed Nick on the water, she was tried by the state of Washington. If she crossed state lines and hunted him down in Louisiana, she would be violating the criminal statutes of the state of Louisiana, a completely different sovereign that has never put her in jeopardy before. Furthermore, By crossing state lines with a firearm to commit a premeditated act of violence, she triggers federal jurisdiction. So, in reality, Libby wouldn't just face charges in Louisiana. The Federal Bureau of Investigation would likely get involved, and she could face federal prosecution for interstate stalking and murder. Instead of walking away a free woman, she would be facing down the barrel of multiple sovereign jurisdictions, each taking their turn to ensure she never saw the outside of a prison cell again. To determine if two charges are actually the same offense, courts utilize a strict legal framework known as the Blockburger test, derived from a 1932 Supreme Court case, Blockburger versus United States. The test asks a very specific question: does each charge require proof of an additional fact which the other does not? In Libby's case, the first trial required proving she killed him on a boat in Washington on a specific date. The second trial would require proving she shot him with a gun in Louisiana years later. The facts are entirely different. The evidence is completely separate. There is no overlapping timeline. Under the Blockburger test, her brilliant revenge scheme is exposed as a guaranteed ticket to a lethal injection gurney. The true danger of movies like Double Jeopardy is how masterfully they weaponize our own sense of justice against our common sense. The narrative is so emotionally satisfying, the pacing is so relentless, and the performance is so gripping that we willingly suspend our critical thinking. We want the loophole to be real because we want the universe to balance its scales. We want the victim to be able to legally strike back at the villain who destroyed her life. But the American legal system does not operate on poetic justice or cinematic karma. It operates on rigid statutes, jurisdictional boundaries, and centuries of complex appellate court rulings designed specifically to close these exact types of loopholes. If you ever find yourself sitting across from a detective, surrounded by circumstantial evidence, do not rely on legal advice whispered to you in a jail cell by a disgraced lawyer, and certainly do not rely on the plot of a 90s thriller. Hollywood writes scripts to keep you glued to your seat, not to keep you out of a federal penitentiary. The justice system is a cold, calculating machine that does not care about the irony of your situation. It only cares about the elements of the crime in front of it. So, while Ashley Judd's character remains a legend of cinematic revenge, in the real world, she would be nothing more than a textbook example of premeditated murder. And if you think the Double Jeopardy myth is a wild misunderstanding of the law, wait until you discover the horrifying reality of the Yellowstone zone of death. A 50-square-mile strip of federal land where constitutional technicalities might actually allow a serial killer to operate with complete and total legal immunity.